Joining us now, the White House's National Security Council spokesman, John Kirby. John, thanks so much for being here this morning. What's your response to Russia claiming that it's actually Washington who is behind this drone attack, saying essentially they tell Kyiv what to do?
There's a word that comes to mind that I'm obviously not appropriate to use on national TV. I would just tell you Mr. Peskov's lying. I mean, it's a ludicrous claim. The United States had nothing to do with this. We don't even know exactly what happened here, Caitlin, but I can assure you the United States had no role in it whatsoever. And again, just to be clear, and I think you covered this at the beginning, we neither encourage nor do we enable Ukraine to strike outside Ukraine's borders.
Do you have any information that might indicate who was behind? No, the drone strikes.
No, we don't, Poppy. We really don't. I mean, we're trying to learn more about this best we can, but we honestly just don't know what happened here. I think here's another thing that happened, though, Poppy.
Sure.
In just the last 48 hours or so, Mr. Putin has continued to rain down on Ukraine cruise missiles and drones and conducting other kinds of airstrikes. And just yesterday killed 23 innocent civilians in a residential complex that they hit, likely intentionally. So that's also what's happening, and I think we can't forget that.
Are you saying that you think this is a pretext by Russia for those actions?
No, I'm not saying that. I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay.
It's not as if just back up even longer than 48 hours ago. Over the course of the weekend, Mr. Putin was flying cruise missiles and drones, hitting civilian infrastructure and targets throughout Ukraine. It's not like he's looking for an excuse to continue to try to find ways to kill innocent Ukrainians.
Given all of that, Kirby, do you see Putin as a lawful and legitimate military target?
Look, we don't favor, we don't endorse strikes on individual leaders. Mr. Putin is the aggressor here. His forces are in Ukraine illegally in an unprovoked way. If he really wants to end this war, if he really wants to see security there on the continent, he could have his troops pull out of Ukraine right now and end this thing altogether.
You said you don't favor it, you don't endorse it, but is it lawful? Would it be legitimate?
I don't think it's useful for me to get into a legal discussion here. We do not endorse, we do not encourage, we do not support attacks on individual leaders.
Notable to hear you say that. I do want to get also your reaction to what we're hearing from NATO leaders. The Assistant Secretary General for NATO this morning, John Kirby, is saying that they are there is significant risk that Russia could pursue sabotage in terms of their latest actions to disrupt Western life, gain leverage against those nations that are providing support to Ukraine. They're talking about real concern that Russia is targeting NATO's critical infrastructure systems, even underseas cables, et cetera, as just another way to try to fight this. What is your reaction?
That's something we've been mindful of and watching as best we can since almost the beginning of the war, Poppy. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the United States moved, President Biden moved so fast and so decisively to shore up our NATO defenses on the eastern flank. We're watching this very, very closely. I'm not aware of any specific intelligence or information that would lead us to believe that that's about to happen, but we're certainly monitoring this as best we can. It's not, just separate and distinct from that reporting.
Yeah.
It's not as if Mr. Putin hasn't already weaponized energy by the way he has tried to sell oil at well above market prices and hold back the supply to try to coerce the international market. It's not like he hasn't weaponized food. He's done that too. So again, all this would be sort of part of a Russian playbook, but we just I don't have any indications or haven't seen anything that's happening.
John, you did say that the U.S. does not encourage attacks or endorse them on other world leaders. We do know from leaked documents that the U.S. did encourage Ukraine not to attack inside Russia on the anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That came in leaked documents that were made public online. President Zelensky said this week the White House never called him about that leak. Why not?
Well, I can tell you for sure, Caitlin, that as these documents started to get out into the public, we had multiple conversations with high-ranking officials in Ukraine, as you would expect that we would. Frankly, with other countries as well that were affected by these leaks. And so we did communicate with Ukraine again at various levels, various agencies, and with various officials to let them know what was going on and to promise that we'd keep them informed.
Kirby, we've been hearing a lot from the U.S. about when this expected counteroffensive is going to start. What's the latest assessment in the U.S. intelligence view of when that's going to happen and how much potential land Ukraine could retake?
Well, I'm certainly not going to get ahead of Ukrainian plans here. I think that this would be the worst place in the world to try to divulge that, even if we had that kind of information. This is going to be up to the Ukrainians to decide. President Zelensky's the commander-in-chief. He gets to decide where his military operates and when and in what circumstances. So I'll leave it to the Ukrainians to speak to whatever future operations that they might or might not conduct. What I can tell you, though, Caitlin, is that regardless of when or where and what units he decides to use to conduct offensive operations inside his country, he's got pretty much everything he needs to do that coming in the weeks and months ahead. We have provided, again, another security package yesterday of some $300 million, ammunition, artillery pieces, as well as breaching equipment and logistics and sustainment vehicles. He's got about 98% of everything his forces say they need to be able to conduct offensive operations in the spring and the weeks and months ahead. And that's not just coming from the United States. That's coming from allied and partner nations all over the world. So we've really worked hard to get them the material that they need so that if and when they step off, they can do so ready. The other thing, Caitlin, that often gets lost in this is the training we have done. We have trained multiple brigades of Ukrainian soldiers outside the country over the last few months to get them schooled up on something we call combined arms maneuver, which is the kind of integrated warfighting they're going to need, again, when the weather improves and when they're ready to move out. So there's been a lot of training, a lot of material deliveries, a lot of contributions to their efforts. They are ready, and, of course, it'll be up to them to decide how and when to execute.
Don't want to let you go without asking you about Sudan. We've seen just remarkable images out of Sudan. One of our reporters, as you know, was alongside some of the evacuations from Port Sudan of Americans. Samantha Power just told Caitlin on the program, who heads USAID now, that they cannot get the humanitarian aid that is needed in unless there's a permanent ceasefire. Is that achievable in your view? And also, can you guarantee that every American who wants to get out of Sudan can?
So on the first question, is it achievable? We certainly hope so. And that's why we're working through diplomacy to get these two generals to put their arms down and to actually abide by the ceasefires. Now, the ceasefires have gone through a couple of extensions here, and that has resulted in a decrease in the violence, Poppy, but certainly it hasn't eliminated it. It needs to stop so that the humanitarian assistance can get in. It's not just the United States that wants to do this. The UN does. Allied and partner countries want to get humanitarian assistance in. Food, water, medicine, all these are in critical short supply. It's important for these two generals, if they really do care about the future of Sudan and the Sudanese people, to put their arms down and to let this aid and assistance get in. Certainly the United States will be right there with the people of Sudan, trying to make sure that they have those necessary supplies. Now, as for departures, we have, I think, as you know, conducted 3 ground convoys, gotten out, according to the State Department's estimate, more than 1,000 Americans. We continue to stay in touch with Americans to provide any kind of information that they might need, any guidance that they might need, should they still want to get out. I want to tell you that the population of Americans that we were in touch with that wanted to get out, much, much smaller, a fraction of that number that's been floating out there of 16,000, which are largely dual nationals who want to stay in the country. They were born there, they live there, they work there, their families are there, and they want to stay. But we're going to stay in touch with Americans as needed. But I will tell you, again, conducted 3 ground convoys to get Americans out successfully, and that includes even yesterday.
Kirby, before we let you go, I think every interview we do with the administration going forward, especially from a national security perspective, will include this question, which is, what is the latest on the efforts to get Evan Gershkovich out of Russia as he's being wrongfully detained? Have you spoken with Russian officials, and have you spoken with his family lately?
Secretary Blinken talked about this yesterday. We are actively, energetically trying to get him released, as well as Paul Whelan. That has never stopped. There's a proposal on the table for Paul. We will urge the Russians to accept that proposal so we can get him out of there. But yes, we are in touch with the Russian officials and trying to get Evan released. We want more consular access to him. I think we've only had 1 consular visit. We want to get more access to Evan so that we can get eyes on him, get a chance to talk to him. But yes, we are actively involved in trying to secure his release.
There's a proposal on the table for Paul Whelan. What about Evan Gershkovich?
I would tell you we're in initial conversations here, trying to get the Russians to agree to release Evan. I don't think I would go into more detail than that right now at this early stage. But we have not obviously forgotten Evan. We certainly have not forgotten Paul. We're going to try to get both of these gentlemen home to their families where they belong.
Just finally end on asking you about Austin Tice, because we heard Secretary of State Blinken speaking about Austin Tice as well yesterday, and he said the United States should engage with Syria, engage with third countries as well. Kayla and I both this weekend at the White House Correspondents' Dinner spoke to Deborah Tice, Austin's mom. Just so for her sake, does that indicate that she should have more hope this morning that her son is going to come home after 11 years?
What I hope that indicates to her and to everyone who cares about Austin is that the United States has not forgotten him either, and we're going to continue to work on trying to get the best information we can about Austin. We want to see this issue resolved. We want to see him home as well. So I hope that that Deborah can understand how seriously we're taking his detention as well, and trying to get this resolved as quickly as we can.
Hopefully those words can bring her some comfort this morning.
Absolutely.
We
John
hope so.
Kirby, a lot of topics there. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
You bet.